The world was a suffocating shroud of ochre dust and screaming metal. Below, Senior Chief Marcus Thorne's breath hitched, the scent of cordite and fear, a bitter taste on his tongue as his men, his family, bled into the dirt. A phantom shadow, a whisper of a beast, moved through the ruins. They were cornered, the mission a smoking ruin, their comms a static ghost. They were lost. And then, a voice, calm and detached, sliced through the chaos. A voice from the sky. Valkyrie to ground. "Give me a target. I'm feeling lucky today." The twist wasn't who was coming to save them, but what that salvation would cost. The haze was not a metaphor. It was a suffocating, tangible thing, a maelstrom of pulverized concrete and fine orange desert dust, kicked up by a dozen recent explosions. It hung in the air, a physical manifestation of chaos and confusion, a blinding curtain that muffled sound and swallowed light. Senior Chief Marcus Raptor Thorne tasted it with every gasping breath. The chalky grit of failure, the acrid tang of gunpowder, the coppery scent of his own blood trickling from a gash above his eye. His team, SEAL Team 7, was a small, bleeding island in a sea of unknown hostiles. What was supposed to be a simple snatch and grab of a mid-level HVT, a ghost named the Architect, had gone catastrophically wrong. Intel had been a lie, the ambush a finely tuned orchestra of coordinated fire and psychological torment. They were not facing a disorganized militia. They were fighting a disciplined, well-equipped, and deeply motivated army. "Bulldog, status!" Thorne's voice was a raw, strained growl, his focus locked on the shattered window frame he used. "For cover." The rat-a-tat of an enemy PKM chattered from a third-story window across the street, its rounds tearing into the crumbling brick above his head. From behind a collapsed concrete wall, Hector Bulldog Vargas, the team's heavy gunner, laid down a furious, suppressive burst from his M240B. The weapon bucked and roared in his hands, a sound that was both comforting and terrifying in its desperation. 500 rounds left, Chief, and they're still coming." Thorne risked a glance at his comms expert and medic, Trey Stitch Williams, huddled behind the remains of a sedan. Stitch was hunched over, his hands a blur of motion as he tried to patch a wound on their point man, Ben Tank Ramirez. Tank, a man who had shrugged off shrapnel like a minor inconvenience, lay pale and still, a dark stain blossoming on his chest. "How bad is it, Stitch?" Thorne asked, his voice low and tight. Stitch didn't look up, his face a mask of frantic concentration. "It's bad, Chief. Main artery in the arm, a secondary entry wound in his chest. I'm trying to stop the bleed." His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the immense pressure of his task. Tank was bleeding out, a clock ticking down to 0 in the middle of a swirling battlefield. Gunner Ghost Olsen, their sniper, was a silent sentinel, a barely there shadow, perched high on what was left of a rooftop. His rifle spoke in single, sharp reports, each one a life-ending full stop to an enemy advance. But even Ghost, their ace in the hole, was being overwhelmed. "Chief," Ghost's voice crackled through the comms, calmer than any man in their situation had a right to be. "They're flanking our east position, 2 trucks loaded with fighters. And I've got eyes on the Architect. He's in a command vehicle moving to the northern edge of the street. He's watching. He's enjoying this." The Architect, the man who had lured them into this trap. Thorne's jaw tightened. They weren't just fighting to survive anymore. They were fighting for something more personal, a dark, simmering rage that had been building since the ambush began. "Ghost, can you get a shot?" Thorne asked, his eyes sweeping the street. The orange haze was thickening, the setting sun now a sickly distant smear in the sky. "Negative," Ghost replied, his frustration a rare, sharp edge to his tone. "Too much dust, too many moving parts. He's in the haze with us, Chief. He knows what he's doing." A sudden, deafening explosion ripped through the air, sending a spray of dirt and debris showering over Thorne's position. The PKM gunfire stopped. For a moment, a ringing silence descended. Then came the shout. "Down! Ben's down! Stitch's voice was a choked sob. I can't! He's gone, Chief! I couldn't save him! A hot, searing wave of grief and fury washed over Thorn. Tank, a friend, a brother, gone. The mission was a bust. They were surrounded, a man down and another pinned. The Haze had claimed its first victim. All right, boys, Thorn said, his voice now cold, hard, and devoid of all emotion. It was the voice of a man who had just crossed a line. New plan. We hold this position. We don't run, we don't retreat. We make them bleed for every inch of ground. He unclipped the handset from his vest, his thumb hovering over the push-to-talk button. He had one last card to play, a last resort they'd hoped to never use. Viper 9, this is Raptor 1. We are in the red. We are surrounded. Taking heavy. Casualties, 1 KIA. Repeat, 1 KIA. We are calling for immediate close air support. Danger close. I say again, danger close. There was a long, agonizing pause. The only sound was the renewed chatter of small arms fire and the distant rumble of the enemy trucks closing in. Raptor 1, this is Viper 9. We have multiple KS assets in the area. Confirming danger close request. What are you looking for? The calm, even voice of a JTAC operator came through the comms. We need a big stick, Viper. We need something to cut this Haze apart. Give me a warthog. Give me an A-10. Another pause. The comms crackled. The roar of a truck engine grew louder, closer. They were coming for them. Raptor 1, stand by. Patching you to the asset. Valkyrie, you have the package. The new voice was smooth, confident, and utterly detached from the carnage on the ground. A voice that had seen 1,000 hells and learned to be the architect of its own. Raptor 1, this is Valkyrie. Read you 5 by 5. What's your position? What's your direction of attack? Thorn's eyes scanned the terrain, the dust, the smoke, the encroaching enemy. He saw the architect's command vehicle, now parked at the northern edge of the street, its occupants watching the slaughter. Valkyrie, our position is the burnt-out sedan on the north-south street. Our location is... Thorn rattled off the coordinates from his GPS. The enemy is converging from all 4 points of the compass. The primary target is a command vehicle at the northern intersection, a dark green Humvee. The architect is inside. He's the one who put us here. Put the hammer on him. Copy that, Raptor 1. Humvee target. Direction of attack, north 2, south, across your position. I will be cutting through the street from the northern side. I need you to confirm that you are danger close and you have a clear egress path if things go sideways. Confirming danger close, Thorn said, his voice flat. He had no egress path. The trucks were blocking the streets, the buildings were full of enemy fighters. This was their last stand. We don't have a clear egress, Valkyrie. We are the target. You come in, you fire, and we pray to God you don't hit us. Understood, Raptor. This is going to be a tight one. I need you to drop a visible marker now. Something that will stand out against the haze. If I can't see it, I can't shoot it. Thorn looked around frantically. All they had left were white phosphorus grenades, the kind that burned with a searing, brilliant white light, a signal of distress. He grabbed one, the canister cold in his gloved hand. Ghost, suppress those PKMs. Bulldog, focus on the trucks. Stitch, you get in the car. Now! I'm lighting the flare! Thorn screamed. Vargas roared his assent, his M240B spitting fire. Olson's rifle cracked, and 2 of the PKM gunners slumped forward, their weapons, falling silent. But the trucks were closer now, the shouts of the enemy fighters echoing through the dust. Thorn pulled the pin on the grenade, a small, quiet click in the roar of battle. He held it for a beat, a brief, silent prayer for his fallen brother, then threw it with all his might into the open space in front of the sedan. The grenade tumbled through the air, hitting the ground with a soft thud. It burst to life, a blinding, Screaming pillar of white fire, a star-bright beacon of hope and desperation in the swirling orange haze. "Flare is up, Valkyrie!" Thorn shouted into the comms. "Marker is hot! Hit the Humvee! Hit it now!" The sound was not a growl, but a distant, high-pitched scream, a whine of metal and compressed air. It grew louder, faster, and more terrifying with every second. The enemy fighters, seeing the flare, began to open fire in a panicked frenzy, their rounds splattering against the sedan and the concrete wall. "Coming in hot, Raptor! I see your marker! I see the target!" Valkyrie's voice was the calmest thing on the battlefield. "You are about to get your wish." Thorn dove for cover behind the sedan, pulling the trembling Stitch down with him. He squeezed his eyes shut, his ears braced for the sound. It was the sound of something primal, something ancient and terrible, a sound like a great knife, a knife of steel and fire, cutting through the thick, choking haze of the world. The sound of the A-10's GIU-8 Avenger cannon. It began as a terrifying high-speed burp, then deepened into a deafening roar, a sound that shook the very ground. The tracer rounds, a brilliant chain of red-hot death, poured from the nose of the plane, a solid column of lead and depleted uranium. It was a river of bullets, a torrent of unmitigated fury that slammed into the Humvee at the northern intersection. The vehicle, a fortress of steel, was instantly shredded. The metal peeled away, the tires exploded, the engine disintegrated. The tracer rounds didn't just hit it, they erased it, replacing. The silence was a lie. It was a temporary reprieve, a shallow breath before the next wave. Thorn, his ears still ringing with the echo of the cannon, pushed himself up, his muscles screaming in protest. The air was thick with the scent of ozone, and the heavy metallic smell of fresh blood. The orange haze, now a thin, ethereal veil, began to settle, revealing the full extent of the carnage. Bodies lay scattered across the street, twisted and broken, their weapons glinting in the faint, sickly light of the setting sun. The once imposing Humvee was a smoking, mangled wreck, a monument to the A-10's devastating power. Status. Thorn's voice was a low rasp. He didn't need to ask about Tank. The silence from Stitch told him all he needed to know. "Bulldog's fine, Chief." Vargas's voice was a shaky shout from behind the wall. "Just got knocked around a bit. My ears are ringing like a goddamn church bell." "Ghost, report," Thorn said, his eyes scanning the rooftops for any sign of movement. "Still up here?" Olsen replied, his voice a ghost in the comms. "Most of them scattered. Looks like the Humvee was a critical nerve center. They're running like rats. 2 trucks went down the east street, another one is trying to retreat south. The remaining fighters are just trying to get out. Valkyrie, this is Raptor 1. Your strike was on target. We have a confirmed kill on the primary vehicle. Thank you for the assist," Thorn said into the handset. "Copy, Raptor. Stay frosty. I'm RTB. Let me know if you need anything else." Valkyrie out. The comms went silent, leaving them with only the crackle of the burning wreckage. Thorn moved to Stitch, who was still hunched over Tank's body, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The medic had a gash on his own forehead, but he ignored it, his focus on the still form of their friend. "Stitch," Thorn said, his voice softer now, but still firm. He placed a hand on the medic's shoulder. "He's gone. You did everything you could." "I couldn't stop the bleeding, Chief," Stitch whispered, his voice thick with guilt. "I was so close." "Doesn't matter how close you were. He's gone. Now we move. We get out of here. We honor him by finishing the job." Thorn's gaze flickered to the smoking ruins of the Humvee. The grim satisfaction from before was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating resolve. "Bulldog, Stitch, let's go. Ghost, we're moving to the Humvee wreckage. See what intel we can salvage." They moved quickly, a tight defensive formation, their weapons up. The street was a moonscape of shattered glass and splintered wood. They reached the Humvee, the heat from the burning metal radiating outwards. Vargas stood guard, his M240B aimed down the street, a silent, unblinking protector. Stitch, His face now a hard, expressionless mask, began a slow, methodical search of the surrounding area for any remaining threats. Thorne approached the wreck, the smell of burnt plastic and scorched flesh a sickening mixture. He kicked a piece of debris aside, his eyes scanning the shattered interior. There was nothing, just mangled metal and blood. The architect, the ghost who had planned this entire ambush, was nothing more than a charred memory, or so he thought. Ghosts, voice crackled through the comms, a new, sharp urgency to his tone. Chief, I've got something. I'm looking at the building directly across from your position. It's got a small satellite dish on the roof. I think it's a comms relay. There's a sniper up there, but he's down. I have a clear path to it. I'm going in. Negative, Ghost. We stick together, Thorne ordered, but it was too late. Ghost was already in motion, a shadow moving silently across the rooftops. I'll be quick, Chief, Olson said. This building might have something. The architect wouldn't have just relied on that Humvee. There has to be a backup. I'll meet you there. Thorne cursed under his breath. Ghost was right. The architect was too smart to put all his eggs in one basket. They had to follow up. All right, Bulldog, Stitch. We're moving to Ghost's position. Stay low, stay sharp. They crossed the street, the tension thick in the air. Every shadow seemed to hide an enemy, every whisper of wind a threat. They reached the building and Thorne found a small, unmarked door. It was ajar. The lock shot out. Ghost was already inside. They moved up the stairs, their boots silent on the dusty concrete. The air grew colder, stale. They reached the second floor and found Ghost standing in a small room, a sniper rifle leaning against a wall. The enemy. Sniper lay dead on the ground, a single bullet wound in his head. On a table in the center of the room sat a laptop, still powered on. The screen showed a map of the city, with a red dot blinking on their exact position. The red dot was labeled Raptor. Next to it, a small looping video feed was playing. It was a grainy video from a security camera, showing the street, where they were ambushed. It was a live feed of their current position. The video panned slightly, showing them entering the building. Then, a text message appeared on the screen, a simple, taunting sentence. Did you really think I was that close to the carnage I created? You got lucky, Raptor, but luck runs out. Now, let's see if you can find me before I find you. Thorne felt a cold wave of shock wash over him. The Humvee, the A-10 strike, the feeling of victory, it had all been a diversion, a trap within a trap. The architect had watched the entire engagement from a safe remote location, broadcasting their desperate fight to the world. Their salvation had been a public spectacle, and the cost was now a personal, intimate threat. The grim smile Thorne had felt moments ago was replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated fury. He slammed his hand on the table, making the laptop screen wobble. He had been played. He looked at the screen, at the words, and knew with a bone-deep certainty that the war wasn't over. It had just begun. And the architect, whoever he was enjoying every single second of it. The fury was a living thing, a hot, choking bile in Thorne's throat. He stared at the screen, the taunting message a personal slap in the face. He had been so sure. The roar of the A-10, the satisfying obliteration of the Humvee, the grim sense of justice. It had all been a performance for a ghost. A cruel, elaborate piece of theater designed to humble them, to show them how little they knew about the game they were playing. He's toying with us, Chief, Ghost said, his voice flat and hard as he took his rifle from the wall. The Humvee was bait. He knew what we'd do. He knew we'd call it in. It's a goddamn sick joke, Bulldog growled, his face a mask of red-hot anger. He kicked a piece of debris, the sound a sharp, frustrated clang in the now silent room. Tank died for nothing. We got him. We killed his men, but the bastard who planned it all is out there laughing. Stitch, his face still pale and drawn, walked over to the laptop. His hands, which had been so quick and precise with medical instruments, now moved with a deliberate, trembling slowness. "He's a ghost, but he's not a god," he muttered, his eyes fixed on the blinking cursor next to the architect's message. He had to use something to send this. Something we can track. Thorn watched him, a glimmer of a plan forming in the back of his mind. Stitch was the tech. He could find a way. "Stitch, can you trace the IP, find a digital footprint?" "Anything." Stitch shook his head. "The signal's encrypted, bounced through a dozen proxies. It's a dead end." He paused, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. "But this video feed, it's a live feed, and it's not encrypted. He's streaming it, and he's doing it to make a point." "So we're famous," Bulldog said, with a scoff. "Great. The whole world gets to see us get our asses handed to us." "No," Thorn said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "He's showing them that he's better than us. He's showing them that the mighty SEALs are just pawns in his game." He looked at the team, his eyes hard and unwavering. "We're not going to play his game. We're going to turn it around on him." Stitch's fingers flew across the keyboard, his face a portrait of intense concentration. He pulled up a complex network topology, tracing the origin of the video feed. The feed is broadcasting through a local ISP, but the source is a mess. It's a series of nodes, a network of unsecured webcams and compromised servers. It's a digital labyrinth. "Can you get us in?" Thorn asked. Stitch nodded, a single decisive motion. "I can. He wants us to see this. He wants us to follow the breadcrumbs. He wants to lead us somewhere." "Let him," Thorn said, a grim smile returning to his face. "We'll follow his path, but we'll make our own rules." He turned to Ghost. "Find us a route, Ghost. No vehicles. We move on foot, stay in the shadows. He's watching, so we make sure he sees exactly what we want him to see." Ghost gave a short, sharp nod, already pulling up a detailed map of the city on a tablet. He started marking a path, a circuitous route that would take them through abandoned buildings, over rooftops, and through the war-torn back alleys. "Bulldog," Thorn said, turning to his heavy gunner. "You're on point. Keep an eye out for anything that looks out of place. This isn't a fight anymore. This is a hunt. And we're the ones doing the hunting." As they prepared to move, Stitch spoke up again, his voice quieter this time. "Chief, there's one more thing. I found a file on the server he's using. It's not encrypted. It's a video. It's for us." Thorn's blood ran cold. He walked back to the laptop, his heart pounding in his chest. Stitch clicked the file, and a video began to play. It was a grainy, low-light shot of a small, nondescript room. In the center of the room, tied to a chair, was a man. His face was bruised, a gag in his mouth, but even in the poor lighting, Thorn recognized him. It was a civilian contractor, an engineer they had worked with on a previous mission. Then, a voice, the same calm, detached voice from the A-10 comms, filled the room. The voice of Valkyrie. "Raptor 1? This is Valkyrie. I am a combat pilot, not a goddamn savior. The architect has a message for you. He says he wants to play a game, and if you don't play by his rules, he's going to make this contractor disappear." The video ended with a final chilling message from the architect, scrawled on a whiteboard in the background. "A life for a life. Your friend for a ghost." The silence that followed was heavy and final. The architect hadn't just tricked them. He had turned their own allies against them, their own salvation into a weapon. The cost of the A-10 strike, the glorious moment of their salvation, was now a human life, and the irony of it was a bitter, unbearable weight. The silence was a thick, oppressive blanket, but it was nothing compared to the deafening roar of Thorn's rage. The air in the small room, thick with the smell of dust and burnt electronics, seemed to crackle with the energy of his fury. He stood there, his fists clenched, his knuckles white, staring at the frozen image on the laptop screen. The face of the civilian contractor, bruised and fearful, was a searing accusation. The words on the whiteboard, a cruel and personal taunt. Valkyrie, Thorne muttered, the name a bitter pill on his tongue. The voice that had been their saving grace was now a part of this monstrous game. She was in on it? No, Chief, Ghost said, his voice calm, cutting through the emotional haze. Listen to her message again. The architect has a message for you. She was a courier, not a conspirator. She was being used, just like we were. She's just a pilot. This whole thing is above her pay grade. He used our own call for help against us, Bulldog snarled, kicking the wall with a frustrated grunt. The bastard knew. He had it all set up. Tank died for a fucking show. Stitch, however, was already in the zone, his fingers flying across the keyboard with a renewed sense of purpose. No. Tank didn't die for nothing, he said, his voice quiet but firm. He bought us time, and he bought me access to this. The architect made a mistake. Thorne turned to him, his rage momentarily forgotten, replaced by a flicker of hope. What is it, Stitch? The video feed, Stitch explained, pointing to the screen. He's streaming it live, but the connection is shaky. It's an old, unsecured line. The architect is good, but he's not perfect. He left a watermark in the stream, a small, subtle encryption key. I can use it to hack into the local ISP and find the origin point. It's a risk, but it's our only play. What's the risk? Thorne asked. He'll know we're onto him, Stitch said, not looking up from the screen. He'll see the intrusion. He'll cut the feed. But not before I get a location. It's a digital cat and mouse, Chief, and he just left a string dangling. Thorne looked at his team, a silent, unspoken question passing between them. They had lost a man. The mission was compromised. They were playing a lunatic's game. But they had a lead, and they had a civilian they needed to save. Do it, Thorne ordered, his voice laced with finality. Let's give the bastard what he wants. As Stitch's fingers danced across the keyboard, Thorne turned to Ghost and Bulldog. We move the moment he gets that location. No hesitation. We're going to a hostage rescue, not a snatch and grab. This is personal now. We get the contractor and we find the architect. We finish this. Ghost nodded, his face a mask of grim determination. I'm ready, Chief. Bulldog simply gripped his M240B, the metal cool and reassuring in his hands. Stitch worked in a furious silence, the only sound the tap-tap-tap of his fingers and the quiet hum of the laptop. The minutes stretched on, agonizingly slow. Then, a small, triumphant cheer. I got it! Stitch exclaimed. The IP is masked, but the physical location is tagged. He's in an old industrial complex on the western edge of the city. He's using an abandoned factory as his base of operations. The feed is coming from a server there. A new map appeared on the screen, a small red dot blinking in the middle of a sprawling, dilapidated complex. Thorne looked at the location, his mind already calculating the route, the risks, the best point of entry. As Stitch was about to close the connection, another message flashed across the screen, a new, more sinister taunt. This one was a single, cryptic phrase, a ghost from Thorne's past. Your son's name is Leo. You used to read him Moby Dick before bed. I wonder what you'll read him now. Thorne's blood ran cold. The rage that had been a wildfire in his veins was instantly extinguished, replaced by a cold, numbing horror. His son's name. A detail he had never shared with anyone on the team. A detail that could only be known by someone who had been inside his life. His home. The architect wasn't just a distant enemy. He was a phantom who had touched his world. And the game, Thorne now knew, wasn't about the contractor or the mission. It was about him. This was a personal vendetta, and the architect had just revealed that he knew where to hit him the hardest. The war was no longer in the Haze. It was in his own backyard. The horror was a cold, paralyzing weight in Thorne's gut. The words on the screen, so simple and yet so devastating, had stripped away the professional soldier and left only the father. He felt the world tilt on its axis, the war-torn street, and the mission dissolving into a single terrifying image. Leo, his son, sleeping peacefully in his bed, unaware of the monster who had reached into his life. Thorne's vision blurred, a suffocating fog of fear that was far thicker than the ochre haze they had just escaped. "Chief?" Stitch's voice, a hesitant whisper, broke through the spell. "Chief, you okay?" Thorne didn't answer. He couldn't. The knowledge that a ghost, a specter of chaos, had intimate knowledge of his family, of his son, was a violation so profound it made him feel physically ill. The game had changed. The rules were gone. This was no longer a military operation. It was a father's desperate personal crusade. Bulldog, a man of blunt force and blunt emotion, saw the look on Thorne's face and understood instantly. He put a hand on Thorne's shoulder, his grip firm and steady. "We're with you, Chief." "All the way." Ghost, ever the silent watcher, simply nodded, his eyes hard and focused on the map. The personal threat to their leader had galvanized the team in a way that the loss of Tank had not. They were no longer just a unit. They were a brotherhood protecting one of their own. "He's baiting us," Stitch said, his voice now devoid of any youthful tremor. It was the voice of a man who had seen the line and was now ready to cross it. "The industrial complex. It's a trap. But it's a trap we have to walk into." Thorne finally found his voice, a low, guttural growl. That was more primal than professional. "Then we walk into it. But we don't go in blind. Ghost, you're on Overwatch. Bulldog, you're with me. Stitch, you're our eyes and ears. We're gonna find this bastard, and when we find him, we're going to make him pay for every fucking word on that screen." The team moved. They moved like ghosts themselves, a silent, deadly unit slinking through the ruined city. The route Ghost had chosen was a masterpiece of urban infiltration, taking them through collapsed buildings, over narrow rooftops, and through the choked alleyways where the shadows were the thickest. They were no longer chasing a target. They were chasing a demon, and the city, once a battlefield, was now a personal hell. As they approached the industrial complex, the scale of it became apparent. It was a sprawling, skeletal ruin of rusted metal and broken glass, a monument to a forgotten age of industry. The fences were breached, the gates were gone, and the only sound was the wind whistling through the shattered windows. This was a place where things went to die, and Thorne knew with a cold certainty that the architect intended for this to be their tomb. "I'm in position, Chief," Ghost's voice whispered in his ear, the sound of a distant, unseen guardian, Angel. "I have a clear view of the entire complex. Looks abandoned, no visible hostiles." "That's what worries me," Thorne muttered. He felt the weight of his own past pressing down on him. The mention of his son, of Moby Dick, was a wound that would not heal. It wasn't just a taunt. It was a ghost from his past, a phantom he had thought was dead, a wound that had been reopened. He had a premonition, a cold, sickening dread that this wasn't just a simple hostage situation. This was the final act. They breached the main factory floor, the sound of their boots echoing in the cavernous, empty space. The air was thick with the smell of oil and decay. They moved in a tight formation, their weapons up, their eyes scanning every shadow, every corner. The place was a maze of rusted machinery, collapsed platforms, and looming silos. "Chief, I've got something," Bulldog said, his voice low and tight. "There's a small room on the second floor. Looks like a control room." They ascended, a rusted metal staircase, the sound of their boots now a loud, clanking announcement of their presence. They reached the control room, the door ajar. Thorne kicked it open, his rifle at the ready. Inside, the room was brightly lit, a stark contrast to the darkness of the factory. In the center of the room, tied to a chair, was the civilian contractor from the video. His head was slumped forward, a gag still in his mouth. "He's alive," Bulldog said, his voice a sigh of relief. Thorne approached cautiously, his rifle still up. Something was wrong. The air was too still. There was no one else there. It was too easy. He reached the contractor, placing a hand on his shoulder. The body was cold. He pulled the gag from the man's mouth and realized, with a jolt of ice-cold horror, that the man was a mannequin, a lifelike effigy. It had been a ruse, another part of the performance. Then a voice, a calm, detached voice, filled the room from a speaker in the corner. "Hello, Raptor. I knew you'd come. I knew you'd follow the crumbs. Did you enjoy the performance? The tragedy? The death? The moment of salvation? It was all for you." "Who the hell are you?" Thorne screamed into the empty room, his fury a raw, animalistic roar. The voice chuckled, a sound as cold and sharp as the metal around them. "You don't recognize me, Marcus? I'm hurt. You of all people should. After all, I'm the ghost you left behind." A single screen on a control panel flickered to life, showing a live feed of the architect. He was standing in a brightly lit room, a clean, sterile room, with a familiar, confident smile on his face. He was a man Thorne had known, a man Thorne had mourned, a man Thorne had thought was dead for years. He was the man who had been the most loyal member of Thorne's old team, the man who was supposed to be dead, who had died on a mission years ago. The architect was his friend. The irony was a gut punch, a brutal and unbearable truth that had been hiding in the haze all along.